Good day everyone, this is Group 10 and in this report we are going to talk about Dr. Jose Rizal's El Filibusterismo, the societal issues tackled in the novel, and the symbolism of the most important characters in it. Now before we proceed, let me introduce to you the reporters for this topic. Starting with Miss Dara Karen Valle, Miss Antoinette May Urmenetta, Miss Corinne Villablanca, and yours truly, Jeremy Uribe. Jose Rizal started writing El Filibusterismo, or The Reign of Greed, in October 1887 in Calamba, Laguna. It was written in Spanish as a sequel to Noli Me Tangere in dedication to the three martyred priests Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, whose deaths left an indelible mark in his mind. The novel is expressing conviction that their treatment and deaths at the hands of the Spanish authorities was unjust. The novel was finished March 29, 1891 after Rizal revised some chapters while he was in London. Then, it was published in Ghent, Belgium in September 1891. El Filibusterismo talks about politics and governmental issues in our country. It targets the Spanish government in an indirect way. This novel tells us how cruel and how purely evil the Spaniards were. In a personal letter to his friend Blumentritt, Rizal clarified his intentions in writing the work. I have not written El Filibusterismo my idea of revenge against my enemies, but only what is for the good of those who are suffering. Now, Rizal portrayed in his novel the different issues and the contributors to these through the characters and symbolisms in El Filibusterismo. Here are the different and most significant characters in El Filibusterismo and the symbolisms they carry.
The first one is Simon, Crisostomo Ibarra in disguise, left for dead at the end of Noli Me Tangere, has surpassed the wealthy jeweler Simon. Simon represents the revolutionaries during that time who supported the idea of holding bloody revolt against the Spanish government. Next is Basilio, son of Sisa, a graduating medical student who befriended Simon. This is the same Basilio introduced in Noli Me Tangere. He represents young educated Filipinos who are apathetic to the needs of the society. Next is Isagani, Basilio's friend, ex-Rio Apolito Gomez, and the man who removed the explosive lamp from the Captain Tiago's house, thus sabotaging Simon's plans. He symbolizes the youth who, despite their being very aggressive and idealistic, cannot be relied on in times of adversity. Next is Cabezang Tales, Cabeza Telesforo Juan de Dios, a former Cabeza de Barangay of Sagpang, a barangay in San Diego's neighboring town, Yani, who is surpassed as the feathered Luzon bandit Matanglawin. He symbolizes the natives and farmers whose lands were seized by the friars. Next is Don Custodio, Custodio de Salazar y Sanchez de Monterredondo, a famous journalist who was asked by the students about the decision for the Academia de Castellano. In reality, he is quite an ordinary fellow who married a rich woman in order to be a member of Manila's high society. He symbolizes as someone who finds pleasure in developing a feeling of inferiority among the people. Next is Paulita Gomez, the girlfriend of Isagani and the niece of Doña Victorina. The old Indio who passes herself off as a peninsular, who is the wife of the quack doctor Tiburcio de Isadora. In the need, she and Juanito Pelaez are wed, and she dumps Isagani, believing that she will have future if she marries him. She represents the women who have no sense of nationalism and sympathy towards others. Next is Makarai, one of Isagani's classmates at the University of Santo Tomas. He is a rich student and serves as the leader of the students yearning to build the Academia de Castellano. Makaray represents the well-to-do Filipino youth during the Spanish era who had good dreams for the country. Next is Father Florentino, a Sagani's godfather and a secular priest, was engaged to be married but chose to be a priest after being pressured by his mother. Father Florentino represented the secular Filipino priests in Rizal's time. It was also through his character that the author stressed his disapproval of bloody revolt. Next is Julie San Jose. Juliana de Dios, the girlfriend of Basilio and the youngest daughter of Cabezang Tales. To claim her father from the bandits, she had to work as a maid under the supervision of Hermana Penchang. Eventually, she was freed but committed suicide after Father Camorra attempted to rape her. Juanito Pelaez, a favorite student of the professors, they belong to the noble Spanish ancestry. Her search for her husband symbolizes her search for the foreign identity that she did not have.
Benza. Abraham Ibanez is his real name. He is a journalist who thinks he is the only one thinking in the Philippines. Benzaib is an anagram of Ibanez, an alternate spelling of his name. The character of Benzaib personifies a corrupted medium. Another character is Placido Penitente. He is a student of the University of Santo Tomas who was very intelligent and wise but did not want, if not only by his mother's plea, to pursue his studies. He also controls his temper against Padre Milion, his physics teacher. Placido means silent and penitente means suffering. Combining those words, silent suffering, or in Tagalog, tahimik na pagluluksa. Another character is Don Tiborcio. He is Victorina de Espadaña's lame husband. He is currently on hiding with Father Florentino. He symbolizes the rich Filipinos who oppress their fellow countrymen in exchange for the influence and riches that they might gain from their powerful association. Next is Capitan Tiago. Santiago de los Santos, although making a cameo appearance, Captain Tiago is Maria Clara's stepfather and the foster father of Basilio. His health disintegrates gradually because of the opium he was forced to smoke given to him by Father Irene. Next is Padre Salve. He is a former parish priest of Santiago and now the director and chaplain of Santa Clara Convent. Padre Salve embodied a rotten state of the clergy. Their tangled feelings, one paternal and the other carnal, for Maria Clara, Ibarra's sweetheart, and rich Capitan Tiago's beautiful daughter, still their determination to spoil Ibarra's plan for a school. Another character is Padre Irene. He is Capitan Tiago's spiritual advisor, the only witness to Capitan Tiago's death. He forged the last will and testament of the latter, so Basilio will obtain nothing from the inheritance. He embodies the few Spaniards who are sympathetic to the Filipinos. Next is Padre Camorra, the last full parish priest of Tiani San Diego, adjacent town, who has a long time desires for young women. He nearly raped Julie, causing the latter to commit suicide. He represents old men who lust over young women, women abuse, or sexual harassment. Another is Quiroga. He is a Chinese businessman who dreams of being a consul of his country in the Philippines. He hid Simon's weapon inside his house. He symbolizes the successful businessman and generous with his wealth. Next is Padre Sibayla. He is a Dominican friar introduced in Noli Me Tangere, now the vice-rector of the University of Santo Tomas. Padre Sibayla symbolizes Rizal's view on the other negative display of Spanish despotism. Lastly, Father Milion, the physics teachers of the University of Santo Tomas. He always becomes vindictive with Placido and always taunts him during class. Father Milion symbolizes an ill-mannered Dominican friar who was Rizal's anatomy professor in Santo Tomas.
The Filipino youth, the new Rizals of our generation, has always been tagged as the hope of the nation. Dr. Jose Rizal himself, in his firm conviction, emphasized that every Filipino, regardless of their status in life, can be a living Rizal only if they would integrate the blazing fire of leadership and love in their respective noble undertakings. Each young Filipino living in the four corners of the archipelago who embodies the values and principles of Dr. Rizal typified has the capabilities of surmounting the seem to be unsurpassable struggles which plague the different areas of national life. It is their hands that would inscribe the next chapters of the country's history. The glorious victory or the tragic defeat that the nation might encounter in the future is all set forth by the actions of these young people who are accorded by the greater responsibilities of contriving monumental changes towards national advancement and welfare. It is therefore in the hands of the Filipino youth which will dictate the destiny of our nation. Dr. Jose Rizal is indeed an epitome of an exemplary leadership who emerged among the young people of his time, who was aware of his potentialities, who desired to make a difference in his country and worked in building his nation. Just like him, the youth of today, the new Rizals, should live up to what he has exemplified, to go behind his virtues and values, to stride on the thoroughfare he has crossed, and to be leaders of change. Rizal stressed the important role of the youth in challenging the government as seen in the efforts of students like Basilio and Isagani to organize themselves and unite to call for reforms. It is easy to teach children what to think, but it is more purposeful to teach children how to think. In such manner, they will be able to develop themselves in means that serve the greater good. The purpose of being Filipino there reclaims the unity and peace in the country. The national hero had never forgotten of conversing about the youth which he resolutely deemed to be the succeeding builders of the country's edifice. His love for the youth is beyond compare as substantiated in almost all of his writings and actions. He explicated through his masterpieces the imperative role of the youth in building the nation and in molding the country's future. In El Filibusterismo, Rizal appealed to the youth of all generations. Through the character of Padre Florentino, Rizal proclaimed, "Where are the youth who will consecrate their golden hours, their illusions, and their enthusiasm to the welfare of their land? Where are the youth who will generously pour out their blood to wash away so much shame, so much crime, so much abomination? Pure and spotless must the victim be that the sacrifice may be acceptable. Where are you, youth, who will embody in yourselves the vigor of life that has felt our veins, the purity of ideas that has been contaminated in our brains, the fire of enthusiasm that has been quenched in our hearts? We await you, O youth. Come, for we await you." Just like Rizal, the young leaders must promote social justice and balance the social order as they emerge in a fast-paced changing society. Rizal still remains relevant to 21st century Filipinos. Unfortunately, this also means that many of the social ills he fought against continue to afflict Philippine society more than a century after his martyrdom. The unequal treatment of colonized nations in the past can still be seen today as foreign powers like the US treat our archipelago as though it is its own backyard that needs to be fortified from enemies, which explains the presence of American troops through the Visiting Forces Agreement, Balikatan exercises, and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Even the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago called the 15-year-old Visiting Forces Agreement, or the VFA, a failure because it merely served to keep the Philippines attached to its former colonizer, the United States. Uncannily, Rizal's warnings about dealing with established and new colonial powers in his essay, The Philippines a Century Hence, are applicable to this very day. Of course, who could ever deny the rampant cases of corruption in the Philippines? multiple politicians who are convicted of crimes and different forms of corruption are still being elected as leaders of our country. Just this year, the country's standing in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, or CPI, has dropped to 2 places, ranking 117th out of 180 countries for 2021. According to Transparency International, the Philippines earned a score of 33 out of 100, its lowest since 2012 and below the global average of 43 and the Asia-Pacific region's average of 45. Women have been abused in the past and still remains as to this day. Just as Maria Clara and Julie San Jose has been victims of rape, there are a multitude of women who are being assaulted, as we can see and hear from the news. Women like Maria Clara were raped regardless of their clothing and intentions. This just shows that rapes happen because there are rapists. Domestic abuse also happens as to this day, as there have been various reports on women being physically tortured by their family, husbands, or partners. Inept leadership is one of the social ills of the past and the present. Unqualified and incompetent leaders are elected into positions which clearly lead to a myriad of problems in our country when it can easily be solved, will continue to destroy us. This in turn deprives us the quality service we rightfully deserve from the elected officials. Last year, Senate President Soto battled for accountability of government officials and employees whose negligence have led to the mismanagement in public spending and the implementation of social services programs. He further said that incompetence cannot recognize incompetence. They have a false sense of confidence that they are indispensable to the government. We cannot let them continue their disservice to the Filipino people.
The influence of the Church. The influence of the Church, or the Catholic Church, over our social and political affairs are still evident as to this day. Religious leaders wielding enormous power and influence in the Philippine political scene is not new, no matter how explicit the separation of church and state is in our Constitution. An example of these churches who practice block voting is Iglesia ni Cristo. With 2.6 million members all over the Philippines as of 2015 census, politicians seek the endorsement of this church, knowing all too well that even though their voting population is only minute, their ability to rally their followers to back the church's candidate may make or break the hotly contested election. Next is a sham justice system. Just like how Rizal despised the justice system of the Philippines while under the Spanish regime, it seems like it hasn't stopped its despicable ways. Perhaps some of the biggest issues which shows just how much of a sham our justice system is was when Revillas discharged for plunder and was released by the Sandigang Bayan from Camp Crame follows the release of Jinggoy Estrada and Juan Ponce Enrile from police custody, both of whom were given back their freedom after posting a bail for a crime that is supposedly non-bailable. Also, when Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was also released from hospital arrest after being cleared from plunder with the Supreme Court. The woman who championed the drive to put these big fish behind bars, former Justice Secretary and Senator Laila de Lima, is herself suffering in Camp Crame. The irony could not be more concise. It tells us that the judiciary, including the Sandigang Bayan and the Supreme Court, is not truly an independent branch of government, but one swayed by the biases and influences of the executive branch and even the lower-ranking government officials. The courts decide according to the preference of the Malacañang, whether it be under a cape of yellow or red. We have seen it happen before. Judges bend the rules, make exceptions, and interpret the law in a manner that suits the agenda of the person they are trying to please. Next is a censorship. Ever since he was a child, Rizal had been a devoted son of the Philippines. In time, as he grew old enough to understand not only the beauty of the nation, but also the tragedy of its political oppression, he expressed with increasing force and clarity his aspirations for a Filipino homeland that would be truly free. On the one hand, he loved the Spain of Cervantes, the monarchy, and the glorious Catholic faith that had repulsed the Muslim invader. On the other, he felt trapped by the unescapable forces of faith that seemed to control the destiny of his people. In El Filibusterismo, the protagonist Isagani makes a stark observation. The strange fate of some people. Because a passing traveler came to their shores, they lost their freedom and became the subjects and slaves not just of the traveler or of his ears, but even of his countrymen. And not for one generation alone, but from generation to generation. What a strange idea of justice! A situation like that one gave one more than enough right to slaughter every foreigner like the most vicious monster spewed up by the sea. As we have seen, Rizal did not espouse armed revolt. However, these words of his novel demonstrate that he was understanding of those who might have such. Next up is the unjust police forces. In the Philippines, the Guardia Civil became the face of state power during Spanish colonial times and were known for abusive behavior, as memorialized in the life and works of Jose Rizal. During martial law, the Philippine constabulary had unchecked powers and it has used them in barbarous ways. During President Duterte's term, police abuses have continued, if not intensified, enabled by the President's promise of protection and impunity. We saw them in the drug war with the killings of Kian de los Santos, Carl Arnaiz, and many others. The secret jail cell in Tondo, the inexcusable death of G. Ik Jo right inside Camp Crame, as well as the testimonial accounts of Palit Ulo and Palit Puri. Ultimately, police officers, together with the power they hold, is the authority they have over the people in regulating and making sure our laws are implemented. By demanding accountability, challenging abuse-prone laws, and most importantly, electing government officials who will make sure that there will neither be impunity for abusive behavior nor inaction toward badly needed police reforms. Now, to conclude, as we can observe, several issues in the society that Rizal tried to criticize and tackle in his novels to make the Filipino people realize the illnesses that the country had during that time are still existing up until today after centuries and generation after generation. To end our discussion, here is a quotable quote we would like to share. Ang kalayaan ay katumbas ng tao at ang karunungan ng talino. Thank you so much for listening.